They laughed before she even opened her mouth. It was the way she walked, slow, with her head down. The way her coat hung off her shoulders like it had given up trying to keep her warm. Every morning, on that same cracked sidewalk in the town square, someone had something to say. She's still alive. I swear she's just doing it for attention. Why doesn't she just disappear already? They didn't know where she came from and they didn't care. To them, she was just the woman on the bench. A shadow. An embarrassment the town had decided not to see, unless it was time to laugh. But that day, something shifted. The usual crowd was gathered, gossiping, whispering, pretending they were better. The sun was low, casting gold across the sidewalk. She sat with her knees pulled close, eyes on the ground, not asking for anything, just being there. And still, that was too much for them. She stinks, someone muttered, loud enough to be heard. Go beg somewhere else, another snapped. Laughter followed, sharp, cruel, familiar. Then came the silence. Boots on pavement, slow, steady, heavy. A presence that didn't belong to mockery. The voices died down as he stepped into the light. A tall black man in a worn cowboy hat, clothes dusty from work, eyes calm like deep water. He didn't look at them, he looked at her. Not down at her, at her. A moment passed, then another. The world seemed to hold its breath. And then he spoke, low, steady, with no trace of pity. Do you want a home and my last name? The next morning smelled like fried grease and old gossip. Vendors opened their stalls like clockwork. One by one, they rolled up metal shutters, wiped down dusty counters, and arranged their goods just so. It was Tuesday, market day, and that meant the same routines, the same faces, the same judgment disguised as community. She was already there, hunched on the edge of the square, same bench as always, same coat. She looked like a statue someone forgot to clean, a blanket tucked tight around her waist, a chipped coffee cup beside her feet, still empty. She never asked for coins, never said a word. But still, they judged her louder than she ever spoke. Can't believe she still shows her face, whispered a woman in heels, arms crossed tight. She used to be something, I heard, another replied. A nurse, maybe, or a janitor. Who knows? Probably made that up herself. All addicts lie. Laughter bubbled from their lips like wine. It had the same flavor, dry, bitter, and meant to show off. Across the square, inside a modest bakery, the bell above the door jingled. A heavy-set woman in her late 50s leaned behind the counter, icing a tray of sweet rolls. She looked out the window, saw the scene unfolding, and sighed. She needs help, not shame, she muttered to herself. Her niece, barely 20, looked up from her phone. She's had help. People like that don't want to change. Nobody noticed the man. Not yet. He stood near the hardware store, arms crossed, back against a faded brick wall. Same cowboy hat, same calm, same work-worn boots. He watched without blinking, not just watching her, but watching how they watched her. His name was Daniel Carter. Some folks knew him as the farmer outside town. Others just called him the quiet one. He came into town once a week for supplies, never lingered, paid in cash, spoke only when necessary. Today, he stayed. Margaret, though no one called her that anymore, shifted on the bench. The cold had crept into her bones. Her back ached. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. When the sun passed behind a cloud, she pulled the blanket tighter and stared at the pavement like it owed her something. Then came the cough. She tried to stifle it, but it escaped, wet, hollow, and louder than she intended. It was enough. One of the church ladies spun on her heel. You're going to spread something, coughing all over the place like that. The others giggled. They didn't even try to hide it. And that's when Daniel moved. He crossed the square slowly, deliberately. People stepped aside, sensing something different. Not anger, not threat, conviction. He walked right up to the bench and stopped. She didn't look up at first, assuming it was another cruel voice, another sermon. But his silence stretched. Finally, she lifted her eyes. And again, he wasn't looking down. He was waiting, listening. "I don't want anything," she said, voice hoarse. "I didn't ask you for nothing." "I know," he answered. "That's why I came." She blinked, confused. No man had spoken to her that way in years. He reached into a paper bag and pulled out a wrapped sandwich. "You hungry?" She hesitated. Pride fought hunger in her eyes. "Just eat," he said gently, placing it beside her. "Don't mean anything more than that." He turned and walked away. Not a word more, not a glance back, but she watched him the whole time. The sandwich was cold by the time she picked it up. It sat there for over an hour untouched while the market buzzed around her. People came and went, stepping over her blanket like she was part of the pavement. The smell of roasted peanuts and fresh tortillas drifted past, but nothing pulled her attention like that sandwich did. It wasn't pity food, she could tell. The man didn't wear kindness on his sleeve. He didn't flash fake smiles or speak with rehearsed sweetness. His face was still in her mind, weathered, dark-skinned, clean-shaven, tired eyes that had seen storms. And yet when he spoke, it didn't sound like charity. It sounded like a choice. She ate slowly. Every bite warmed her chest more than her stomach. When the last piece was gone, she sat still, afraid to feel full. It had been a long time since something didn't come with a price. Later that afternoon, clouds began to gather. Vendors packed up early. Folding tables collapsed. Crates stacked. The women who had laughed at her disappeared into cars and shops, carrying their judgments with them like handbags. The square emptied until she was alone again. That's when he returned. Same boots, same stride, same hat. He stopped a few feet from the bench and waited. No bag this time. No food. Just his presence. "You following me now?" she asked, half joking, half weary. He shook his head once. "I walk this way every week. Never seen you take the sandwich before." She looked at the ground. "I ain't proud." "Didn't say you were." A breeze tugged at her blanket. She clutched it tighter. "What's your name?" he asked. She didn't answer at first. The question felt sharp somehow, like it touched something raw. "Margaret," she said finally. "People used to call me Maggie. Long time ago." He nodded. "I'm Daniel." Silence again. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It stretched, like a space being made for something new. "You been out here long?" he asked, not nosy, just curious. Margaret gave a slow shrug. "Long enough to forget what month it is." He leaned back on one foot, looked up at the sky. "It's November," he said. "Thanksgiving next week." She scoffed softly. "Ain't got much to be thankful for." "I got a house with too many rooms," he said, "and too much land for one man to run by himself." Margaret glanced at him, eyebrows raised. "You offering me a job?" "No," he said. "I'm offering you a walk." That made her blink. "A walk? Just a walk?" he repeated. "If you trust me." Margaret stared at him for a long moment. She wasn't stupid. She'd learned to read people the way a stray reads weather. Most men who offered just a walk had wolves behind their teeth. But he didn't have that look. He had something else, something quieter, like someone who had been alone too long and decided that silence wasn't strength after all. "I don't walk fast," she warned. "Neither do I." He extended his hand. She didn't take it, but she stood up anyway, wrapped the blanket around her, fixed the buttons on her coat, and stepped down from the bench like it was the last rung of a tall ladder. They walked side by side, slow, quiet, toward the edge of the square. For the first time in years, no one was watching her. The road out of town was mostly dirt and regret. They walked slowly, boots and old sneakers kicking up dust. Every so often a car passed by, but no one stopped. No one honked. Maybe because they didn't recognize her standing upright, or maybe they didn't care. Either way, it felt like freedom. Margaret didn't speak for the first half mile. She was busy watching him. Daniel didn't walk like a man with somewhere urgent to be. He walked like someone who knew patience. Long, steady steps, arms swinging loose, eyes fixed on the path ahead. "You always pick up strays?" she asked finally. "Nope." "Why me then?" He didn't answer right away. "You weren't begging," he said at last. "You weren't selling some story. You were just still, like you were holding yourself together." Margaret let out a short laugh, dry and bitter. "I was trying not to fall apart." "Same thing." They passed a rusted mailbox, then a broken fence. The road curved gently toward open land. Cotton fields on one side, horses grazing on the other. "Where we going?" she asked. "My farm, just up ahead." "You got family?" "No one left but a sister. Evelyn. She stays on her side, I stay on mine." "Sounds peaceful." It was. They turned up a gravel driveway where a white farmhouse stood tall against the horizon. The paint was chipped, the porch sagged a little, but the place had dignity, like its owner. Margaret hesitated at the gate. "You bringing me here so your sister can call the cops?" she said. Daniel shook his head. "Evelyn don't run my house. I do." She stepped through. Inside, the house smelled like wood polish and something simmering. A pot of beans on the stove, a loaf of cornbread wrapped in a towel. Margaret stood in the doorway like she didn't belong. Daniel didn't rush her. He set his keys on the table, took off his hat, and poured 2 glasses of water. "Sit if you want," he said, "or stand, your choice." She sat. He slid the glass toward her. She drank slowly. He did too. Then came the silence again, the kind that wasn't awkward, just open. "I'm not offering charity," he said. "I didn't think you were." "I'm not offering romance either," he added. Margaret raised an eyebrow. Daniel leaned forward. "I'm offering something different. A house, a name, and a place. But not out of pity." She studied him, trying to find the lie. "You don't even know me," she said. "I don't need your whole story," he said. "I've seen enough in your eyes." "You've seen pain," she said. "Everybody's got that." "No," he replied. "I saw fight. You've been knocked down, but you're still standing. Most folks just curl up, but you sat there like you were waiting to be remembered." Margaret swallowed hard. That hit something. He stood, walked to the window, and looked out over the field. "I don't want a maid. I don't want a nurse. I don't want a rescue project. I want someone real, someone who knows what it means to lose everything and still breathe." Margaret leaned back in the chair, arms crossed. "So what, you offering marriage?" He turned, quiet for a beat. "I'm offering a name," he said, "if you want it." She looked down at her hands, dirty, calloused, shaking. "I'm not clean," she whispered. "I got history, ugly parts." "So do I," he said. Silence. This time it was different. This time it was choice. The next morning came with a knock, not a gentle one. It was sharp, 3 firm raps on the wooden screen door, followed by the sound of footsteps crossing the porch like they owned it. Margaret was in the kitchen, barefoot, wearing one of Daniel's old flannel shirts. She froze. Her hands were still wet from washing the dishes. Daniel looked up from the table and sighed without looking at the door. "That'll be Evelyn." "Should I go?" Margaret asked. He shook his head. "You're not a secret." He stood and walked to the door, opening it without ceremony. Evelyn Carter stepped inside like she had every right to. She was in her early 60s, tall with silver streaks through her tight curls and a handbag clutched close to her ribs like a Bible. Her expression was sour before she even saw Margaret. When she did, her lips tightened into a straight line. "So it's true," Evelyn said. Daniel nodded once. "She's here." "You brought her into Mama's house?" "It's my house now." Evelyn walked in slowly, scanning the room like she was taking inventory of everything Margaret might have touched. Margaret dried her hands and stood her ground. She'd faced worse than cold eyes before. She didn't flinch. Evelyn looked her over from head to toe, bare feet, bruised arms, tired eyes. "You got her sleeping in the guest room?" Evelyn asked. "No," Daniel said. "She sleeps in my room." Evelyn flared. "You lost your damn mind." "She's not trash," Daniel said quietly. "Watch your tone." "She's not family either." "Maybe she will be." That landed like a slap. Evelyn turned to Margaret now, arms crossed. "What's your game?" "No game," Margaret said calmly. "Oh, there's always a game," Evelyn snapped. "Women like you don't just fall into fresh sheets, and good men without working some angle." "I didn't ask to be here." "But you didn't say no either." Margaret stepped forward then, just a little. "You think I want your approval? You think I need it?" Evelyn raised her chin. "You want to wear the Carter name? You better believe you do." Daniel stepped between them, not loud, not aggressive, but firm. "Evelyn, you don't get to decide who belongs here." "I'm your sister." "You're also the reason I stopped bringing people home." Silence. Evelyn stared at him, stunned, like he'd slapped her without raising a hand. "This woman," he said, pointing gently toward Margaret, "hasn't asked me for one thing. Not food, not money, not even kindness. She's earned more respect in 2 days than most folks in this town ever gave." Evelyn scoffed. "So you're just going to ignore what people will say?" "I've been ignoring people my whole life," Daniel said. "A few more whispers won't kill me." Evelyn narrowed her eyes. "It ain't just whispers. You bring her into your life, into our name, you're going to make enemies. The church, the neighbors, the family, they won't sit quiet." Daniel didn't blink. "Let them talk," he said. "Ain't their name to carry?" Evelyn's face twitched. Anger, maybe fear. But she didn't argue further. She grabbed her purse tighter, turned to Margaret one last time. "Don't think quiet means welcome," she said coldly. "I'm watching." And with that, she left. The door slammed shut behind her. Margaret let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Daniel walked over, calm as ever. "You okay?" he asked. Margaret looked at him, a strange mix of fury and grace in her eyes. "I've been called worse by better women," she said. Daniel almost smiled. By Friday, the town knew. They always knew. One woman with too much time and a church group chat was all it took. By the time the sun was high, half the market stalls were already buzzing, and by noon, Margaret's name had returned to the streets, except now they added Daniel's with it. "Did you hear? He's lost his mind." She was living on a bench, and now she's got a man and a house. Not just any man, Daniel Carter. That farm's been in his family since before the war, and the last line always came quiet, like a bitter cherry on top. "She's not even from here." Margaret felt it before she heard it. The sideways looks, the sudden quiet when she walked by, the smiles that didn't touch eyes. She wasn't invisible anymore, but that didn't mean she was seen. She had become noticed, which in towns like this was far worse. She walked through the market with a basket Daniel had given her. He said it was time she picked what she wanted to eat, not just what was left. But the trip felt more like a walk through a courtroom. A woman selling tomatoes leaned in close to a customer and whispered something, eyes flicking to Margaret. The customer didn't hide her laugh. At the bakery, the cashier didn't make eye contact. At the butcher's stall, she stood waiting with her money out while 3 other people were served before her. When she finally spoke, "Excuse me, I just need half a pound of stew meat," the butcher barely looked up. "You sure you got the right kind of money?" She stared at him. He didn't flinch, and that's when she understood. They didn't think she had changed. They thought she'd tricked someone. A pair of teenagers walked by. One of them, maybe 16, whispered too loudly, "That's her, the homeless lady Mr. Carter picked up." The other one replied, "Why? She don't even look clean." Margaret's hands tightened on the basket. She kept walking, but the sting didn't fade, not even when she reached the edge of the market and turned down the back alley shortcut. There, where no one could see, she finally let her back press against the wall and exhaled hard. The past wasn't gone. It was just repackaged, and it followed her. "Didn't take long," came a voice. She looked up. It was Evelyn. Leaning against the opposite wall, arms crossed, face unreadable. "You thought a change of clothes and a roof would make them forget?" Margaret didn't answer. "They still see you for what you are," Evelyn said. "They'll never call you Mrs. Carter. Not for real." "I'm not asking for their blessing," Margaret said, her voice steady. "No," Evelyn said, stepping closer. "But you're walking through their streets, sleeping in a name that means something here. That's enough to make you their problem." Margaret's jaw tightened. "You want me gone?" Evelyn paused. For the first time, there was something in her eyes that wasn't cruelty. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was pride wrapped in armor. "I want you to understand," she said. "This town don't forget, and it don't forgive. You might think you're safe now, but all it takes is one wrong step." Then she walked away. Margaret stayed in the alley, gripping her basket, heart pounding. She thought of Daniel. She thought of the bench. And she stood there long enough to remember who she was before the fall. When she finally stepped back into the light, her head was high again. The church sat on the edge of town like a monument to order. White paint, tall windows, bell tower that hadn't rung in years. But the silence never meant absence. In this place, respect and reputation were the real sermons, and the pulpit was only one of the ways they preached. Daniel didn't go often. He sat in the back row when he did, left before the coffee and cake. But this time, he came midweek, when no one else would be there. He came because the pastor had asked for a word, and because Margaret needed to know what they were really up against. She waited outside. Inside, Pastor John was seated behind his desk, a heavy man with tired hands and a voice like smooth gravel. He'd baptized Daniel when he was a boy, prayed over their father's funeral, watched the Carter land pass down through generations. He didn't smile when Daniel entered. "Have a seat." Daniel didn't sit. John leaned forward. "You always were stubborn." "I didn't come for small talk." "No, you didn't," the pastor said. "You came because I asked, and I appreciate that. Now let me speak plain." Daniel crossed his arms. "Word travels fast," John continued. "Faster when it don't sit right with folks. You bringing a woman like that into your house, into your name, it's causing unrest." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "Unrest?" "You know what I mean." "No," Daniel said. "Say it." John exhaled. "This is a town that values order, families, testimony. You're not just a man, Daniel. You're a Carter. You represent something." Daniel stepped closer. "So what exactly is she then? A stain?" "I didn't say that." You didn't have to." The room fell silent. John rubbed his temples. "Look, son, I don't doubt the Lord works in mysterious ways. Maybe there's purpose in this. But there's a right way to do things. Bring her to church first. Let people get used to the idea. Don't rush talk of marriage." "I'm not asking for permission. You're going to need forgiveness if you keep going like this." Daniel's jaw tensed. "Let me tell you something," he said quietly. "She's got more strength than half the pews in this building. You talk about order and testimony. She lived hell and still gets up in the morning. That's faith, even if she don't preach it." John shook his head. "This town won't understand." "Then let it choke on its confusion." The pastor looked at him long and hard. "Are you ready for what comes next?" "I wasn't ready for life without her." There was no reply. Daniel turned to leave. At the door, he stopped. "You baptized me in that water," he said, voice low. "Maybe it's time you remembered what it was for." Then he walked out. Outside, Margaret waited under the shade of a tree. She didn't ask how it went. She could read it in his face. But Daniel looked at her, not with doubt, not with fear, with resolve. She nodded once. Then they left the church behind. It happened the way all ugly things do, loud, messy, and in public. Margaret had just stepped out of the pharmacy. She had a brown paper bag in her hands, soap, toothpaste, a new brush. Things she hadn't bought for herself in years. The kind of small dignity most people didn't even think twice about. She was halfway down the block when she heard it. "Maggie!" At first she thought she imagined it. No one had called her that in years. But the voice rang again, closer now and sharper. "Maggie Williams, you just gonna pretend you don't hear me?" She turned, and her past stood there drunk in daylight. Leonard, her ex-husband, still tall, still handsome in the way only broken men can be, like something that once had value but had been pawned too many times. His clothes were wrinkled, his beard unkempt, and his eyes bloodshot with something mean behind them. Margaret froze. "Didn't expect to see you up on your feet," he said, staggering a bit as he approached. "Last I saw you, you was curled up behind that bus station crying for pills." People had already started to slow down, to look. Margaret clutched the paper bag tight and turned to walk away. But Leonard wasn't done. "Oh, I get it now," he laughed, loud and ugly. "Found yourself a new man, huh? Someone rich enough to forget what you are." Margaret kept walking. "You ain't nothing, Maggie. Just a junkie with a fancy coat now." Someone across the street gasped. Someone else pulled out a phone. She felt her legs moving faster than her thoughts. He kept shouting. "Tell him about the money you stole. Tell him about the nights you sold your damn wedding ring for a hit." She didn't look back. The bag tore in her hand. Soap spilled out onto the sidewalk. She didn't stop to pick it up. She just ran. At the farmhouse, Daniel was chopping firewood when she burst through the gate. He dropped the axe when he saw her. "Maggie!" Her chest was heaving. Tears had already dried on her cheeks. She didn't speak, just went inside and slammed the door. He followed her in, found her in the kitchen, leaning over the sink, hands trembling. "He's here," she said. "Leonard. He found me." Daniel stepped closer, carefully. "I didn't know he was still alive," she whispered. "Last I heard, he got locked up or ran off. I swear, I didn't know." "I believe you." "He said things." She swallowed hard. "Things I ain't proud of. Things I thought I left behind." Daniel didn't interrupt. She looked at him then, eyes red, voice shaking. "Do you still want me?" He didn't answer with words. He stepped forward, wrapped her in his arms, and let her cry. Later that night, they sat on the porch. The stars were quiet. The land felt still. Margaret spoke first. You don't know what I was back then, she said. I let that man ruin me. I let addiction eat everything. My job, my home, my name. Daniel looked at her, steady and soft. You still got your name, he said. Not one this town respects. They will, and if they don't. He took her hand. Then let them choke on that too. She laughed just once, tired but real. Inside the house, the phone rang. Daniel didn't answer. He already knew who it was. The church smelled like wood and cold silence. There were no flowers, no grand music, no rows of smiling faces. Just a dozen wooden pews, a handful of whispers, and the kind of tension that hangs in the air when something sacred feels wrong to the people watching. To them, this wasn't a wedding. It was a spectacle. Margaret stood at the back of the small chapel, wearing a plain cream dress that Daniel's sister had mocked the moment she saw it. Her hair was pinned up, simple and proud. No veil. No makeup. Just the woman she had rebuilt from the ruins. Daniel waited at the altar, wearing a pressed shirt, clean boots, and his old worn hat placed gently on the bench beside him. He looked like a man who had already made peace with losing everything, except her. The preacher cleared his throat. We gather today. His voice faded under the weight of eyes that refused to look forward. Half the town was there, not to celebrate, to witness, to whisper, to wait for someone to object. And someone did. The doors swung open. Evelyn, dressed in black like it was a funeral. She walked down the aisle slowly, her heels tapping hard against the floor. Her face was tight with something beyond anger, control. She stood halfway between the pews and the altar, turned to the preacher and raised one hand. I can't let this go on. Gasps, murmurs. A few people sat up straighter. Daniel didn't flinch. Margaret didn't look away. She's not who you think she is, Evelyn said, turning to the crowd now. She has a past, a record, an ex-husband who found her behind a trash bin 3 years ago. Margaret closed her eyes for a moment, but she didn't move. She's not clean, she's not honest, and she's not family. Then she turned to Daniel. Don't do this. Don't throw away your name for a woman who lost hers. Silence. The preacher looked to Daniel, unsure whether to stop. Daniel stepped forward. His voice didn't rise, but the room bent around it. You done? He asked Evelyn. She blinked. Did you not hear me? I heard every word, he said, and I still choose her. He turned to the room. All of you came here to watch something fall apart. Some of you came hoping to see me change my mind, but I didn't bring you here for your blessing. He took Margaret's hand. I brought you here to watch me stand beside the woman I love. More murmurs. Some people stood to leave. Let them go, Daniel said, eyes still on Margaret. I will not live a life built around their approval. I'd rather be poor in peace than rich in reputation. He turned to the preacher. Go on. The vows were short, honest. Margaret's voice shook once, but she didn't cry. Daniel said his words slow, steady, eyes fixed only on her. And when it was done, the preacher spoke the final line with quiet gravity. By the authority given to me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. Daniel didn't kiss her right away. He just looked at her, really looked, and whispered, Now they have to call you by your name. Outside, a few neighbors stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed, mouths tight. Margaret walked past them slowly, hand in Daniel's, head held high. They didn't cheer, they didn't smile, but they didn't look away. They didn't call her Margaret, not yet, but they had stopped calling her that woman. She walked through the market again a week after the wedding. Same streets, same faces, same stall, where the butcher once refused to serve her. This time he nodded, barely, but it was a nod. At the bakery, The girl behind the counter stammered a greeting. Mrs. Carter, would you like—" Margaret didn't smile, but she responded, calm as rain. "Just one roll. Fresh, if you've got it." The girl rushed to get it. Small things, details. The whispers didn't vanish, but they changed shape. Now they were layered with confusion, maybe fear, maybe a quiet kind of shame. She married him for real? She's living at the Carter farm. I saw her hanging laundry out back. Don't matter how she got the name, she's got it now. It wasn't approval. It was adjustment. The Carter name carried weight, and now so did she. Back at the farmhouse, Margaret was outside in the morning light, pulling weeds from the garden when Evelyn arrived again. No announcement, no knock, just footsteps across the dirt. Margaret didn't stand. She kept her hands in the soil. Evelyn stood behind her for a long moment. "You got them scared," she said finally. Margaret wiped her hands on her apron. "I didn't ask for fear." "No, you didn't," Evelyn said. "You just earned it." She paused. "You made them look twice. That's not easy around here." Margaret finally stood and faced her. "You still think I don't belong?" Evelyn didn't answer directly. She looked at the house, then back at Margaret. "You changed something," she said. "And folks don't like things that change." "Neither do sisters," Margaret replied. That almost got a smile. Almost. That Sunday, they walked into church together. Daniel in his best shirt. Margaret in a dark blue dress and a soft gold scarf wrapped around her hair. Her skin glowed under the morning light. She didn't cling to his arm, but he held her hand anyway. They walked down the aisle to their usual pew, second from the back. People watched. Some nodded. Others just stared, but nobody spoke. Pastor John gave his sermon like always. But when he looked at Margaret during the closing prayer, his voice wavered just slightly, like even he wasn't sure what to call her anymore. Outside, a woman from the choir approached. She didn't smile. She didn't shake hands. But she said the words that made the others freeze. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter." Margaret met her eyes. "Good morning." Nothing more. She didn't gloat. She didn't explain. She didn't have to. Her name had done the work for her. Thanksgiving came with wind and smoke. The fields behind the Carter farmhouse burned slow with autumn light. Inside, the house smelled of roasted sweet potatoes, spiced ham, cornbread, and old tension. Margaret stood at the kitchen counter, tying a cloth napkin into a triangle. Her hands didn't shake anymore. Daniel moved behind her carrying a tray of greens. His sleeves were rolled up, his face flushed from the heat of the oven. They moved together like people who'd done this for years, even though it had only been weeks. Then came the knock. Evelyn. She didn't wait to be welcomed. She stepped inside, with her usual weight, coat in one hand, a pie in the other. "You cooking sweet potato and pecan?" she asked, looking around. "That's too much sugar." Margaret didn't answer right away. Then, "People can choose what they like. That's what freedom tastes like, isn't it?" Evelyn raised an eyebrow, but she set the pie down anyway. The table was long, longer than it needed to be for just 3 people. It had been their father's, carved by hand and passed down like an heirloom of pride. Margaret had polished it that morning herself. At the head of the table sat one empty chair. Daniel looked at her. "You ready?" She nodded. They all took their seats. Margaret sat at the head. No one questioned it, not even Evelyn. Dinner was quiet at first. The clinking of forks, the passing of dishes, a few remarks about the weather, the land, the church's new roof. But slowly something loosened. Daniel told a story about a bull that jumped the fence last winter. Evelyn added to it, laughing without meaning to. Margaret poured cider and passed biscuits. The food disappeared faster than expected. At one point, Evelyn leaned back, wiped her mouth, and looked at Margaret. Not sharp, not guarded, just looking. "You polished that silver yourself?" she asked. "I did. Grandma used to do that every year. I always hated it." Margaret gave a small smile. "I find it calming. Makes the meal feel real." Evelyn nodded. "It is." That was all. But it meant everything. Later that night, dishes done, candles low, Margaret stepped back into the dining room alone. The table was empty now, quiet. The air still carried warmth and cinnamon. She touched the back of the chair she'd sat in. So many nights in her life had ended with her outside someone else's window, watching families eat, hearing laughter through cracked doors. She had imagined this place 1,000 times, but the real victory was this. She didn't have to imagine any more. She had lived it. She had sat at the head of the table. They used to laugh at me, not because I told a joke, not because I said something funny, but because I existed. They laughed when I walked too slow. They laughed when my clothes were torn. They laughed when I didn't speak. They laughed because it was easier than looking at me. I was the wrong kind of woman in the wrong kind of place with the wrong kind of silence. And silence, to them, was permission. Permission to mock. Permission to dismiss. Permission to forget. But here's what they never understood. Silence can also be strength. I didn't fight them in the streets. I didn't shout to prove I mattered. I let them laugh. And then I kept living. I sat on that bench. I took their words. I took the stares. I took the cold. But I didn't disappear. Because somewhere deep down, I knew, even when I couldn't feel it yet, that pain doesn't mean the story is over. Pain means the story is real. Now they look away for different reasons. Some can't believe I'm still standing. Some hate that I found peace. Some still whisper, but none of them laugh. Not anymore. I wear the name they said I could never touch. I sit at the table they swore would never welcome me. And every time I walk through that market, every time someone lowers their voice or averts their eyes, I remember. I didn't win by becoming someone else. I won by remembering who I was before the world forgot. So if you're watching this, if you're sitting in your own silence, if they're laughing at you right now, loud, cruel, certain, just wait. Hold your ground. Keep breathing. And when the time comes, don't raise your voice. Raise your head, because dignity isn't given. It's taken back.